we want to move to now is a conversation with the solutions providers who are going to be critical to making this happen, both from the private sector and in particular from a range of a good diverse set of utilities. And so that's what we're moving to now. I am pleased to introduce Marc Monbouquette from Enel X. Hopefully I got that right, Marc. I know it's exactly how it sounds. Marc is the Regulatory Affairs Manager for Enel X. He's also got a really deep background as a regulator or as a regulator staff with the California Public Utilities Commission. So I think, Marc, you heard actually just prior to this a little bit of conversation around what those challenges are and look like for folks on the ground level who are trying to implement some of these solutions in a regulatory and utility collaboration context. So tell us a little bit about what Enel X and other solutions providers are really focused on in delivering things on this scale of fleet.
Thanks, Michael, for the question. Can everyone hear me? Great. All right. So just a quick note on Enel X. For those unfamiliar, we are a subsidiary of the global utility company Enel that focuses on customer-facing clean energy technologies and solutions, including demand response, behind-the-meter solar and batteries, and EV charging. On EV charging, we're active across the major segments, including residential, public, commercial, and fleet charging. So, listening to the conversation this morning, sounds like there are a number of challenges related to unlocking the benefits of fleet electrification, especially in terms of the lifetime cost savings that can be realized, versus legacy diesel fleets. There's a lot of contracting and procurement challenges to realize the most efficient way to get the vehicles and the infrastructure deployed, and then also the ongoing energy management and charging optimization to realize operational cost savings instead of letting those opportunities go to waste. So to address the upfront cost barrier and to help on the management side, Enel X offers a turnkey end-to-end charging as a service solution for fleet electrification that seeks to package all components of the vehicle purchase and lease, charging infrastructure and installation, and ongoing energy and charging management into a monthly service fee. So we start out by looking at a comprehensive feasibility study that models the fleet's duty cycles with needed transportation and energy infrastructure, which can reduce the planning and grid upgrade costs associated with the project. Then we look to take advantage of all available incentives or grant money that can help reduce the project's upfront sticker cost in terms of vehicle purchases, utility make-ready money that's increasingly becoming available across the US, and in terms of rebates for EV chargers, which sometimes can be separated out from utility programs. Next, we develop an energy management strategy and look to stack all available energy service revenues by monetizing the inherent flexibility of the EV batteries. So this includes bill savings for installations and peak demand management against utility rates. But then also, owing to Enel X's expertise in demand response, we look to monetize grid-facing services through utility programs or direct integrations in wholesale markets, which we can do while still delivering on the fleet's energy needs. So part of this energy management strategy, of course, is looking at opportunities to co-locate batteries and solar with the EV charging installation, which can help reduce the cost of the overall installation and also assist in resiliency. And finally, we look to package all of this into a financing package and offer the fleet operator access to electrified fleets through a monthly service fee. So it helps take the risk out of a long-term fleet operation, versus trying to structure an upfront purchase. We heard from certain panelists that due to the contracting responsibilities of different bases versus the branches. That can get interesting from a, how do you work in third parties potentially owning assets and providing access to customers like the DoD. But I would highlight that Enel X has a lot of experience in this space in different countries, especially rolling this model out with transit agencies. And we're actually one of the largest e-bus managers globally next to China. So this model, we're trying to deploy it in the US and can be very easily translated to the DoD non-tactical fleet context.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, I think you very charitably addressed that as interesting challenges between base and contracting issues. I think that's, but I think, a lot of the examples that you described strike me as really similar to the experiences that we had a decade ago in trying to deploy more renewable energy on DoD. There are going to be benefits that the private sector can capture and value streams that the private sector can access that aren't available to the government for itself. And so that's why I think it's going to be a really important feature that we incorporate those kinds of, as you described, as a service or turnkey solutions as we're trying to deploy this EVSC, this electric vehicle support equipment. I mean, I think that's a great transition to talk with Lauren Khair, who's the Director of Business Transformation at the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, or NRECA. Lauren, hi, Monica. It's so great to have you. Lauren, you are, you work with a ton of smaller member cooperatives and utilities and things like that, where, they're very interested. They have a huge service territory altogether and cover a ton of DoD bases. And so, you're responsible in many ways for making those collaborations happen. And so I would love to hear just about how you're thinking about this future of offerings of support to your members and how those offerings really translate to DoD, because I think there's a lot of capability within the utilities to help provide some of these services because they're already providing service.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for having me on the panel. Appreciate it. Just in case anybody doesn't know, a co-op is just a not-for-profit member-owned utility. So we serve a little bit over 135 military installations across the country, 56% of the land mass. So we have a very large presence, as Mike mentioned. I was listening to some of the other panels and I was trying to, make some mental notes. So we have the lion's share of utility privatization contracts for electricity, and we're working with those contracts within our cooperatives to figure out, can you modify those contracts to add in some of that EV structure so you take away that risk, as I think Mark mentioned about, having the government try to figure out the vehicles and the chargers, working with their trusted energy advisor or their co-op or utility, we think is a really good model. And so we're actually working with some co-ops that have UP contracts to figure out how can they best work with their DoD installation to meet their needs in some innovative ways. We're also working with some co-ops that have UESCs, utility energy serving contracts, to figure out, can some of that savings be paid, can some of that energy conservation measures, that savings be used for EVs. We think there's an interesting model there. We're also looking at, some of them had mentioned some cybersecurity challenges. So we're working with our cooperatives to make sure that, it fits the standards that are required by DoD. A lot of our UP co-ops are under the NIST 800-171. So, figuring out, do you do, wireless versus cellular? So, we're here to just help, like you said, help our members find opportunities to collaborate. There's a lot of interesting challenges going on in the EV space, but it's a lot of interesting work. And then the other one I would talk about is, how do you do charging networks with microgrids, right? So the solar plus the batteries, which I think some of them have already mentioned, how do you make that cost effective? Because if you put a small mini microgrid on every charger, it could get very expensive very quickly. So how do you do innovative ways to keep the cost down, from, help meet the mission of that base, and also make sure that we're providing that member quality that co-ops always do.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Lauren. And I think that's a nice transition to talk to Monica, who's been on both sides of this issue. So Monica is the lead for federal partnerships at the Southern Company, but prior to that had great career as a senior energy official within the U.S. Navy. And in particular, you heard from Brendan Casey earlier today, working on the Anchor program. Monica actually founded and led the Anchor program for the Navy and really focused exactly on some of the issues that we want to talk about. How do you make those value streams possible? How do you sort of deploy clean energy solutions in a way that all sort of fits together and works together, particularly for the bottom line? And so, I would just love to hear a little bit about your perspectives on your new perspectives or different perspectives now that you've jumped to Southern Company, but also just like how does that relate to your old experiences and perspectives you had previously, and about some of the challenges of making this really transformative change.
Thank you, Mike. Very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I've been on the whole time, so apologize for the technology challenges. So to begin, for putting my old hat on, right? I mean, I think when we look at what this new administration is looking to do, these goals are transformational. There's going to be a very long-term impact on business models and markets for a long time to come. So it goes absolutely without saying that the federal government is absolutely leading by example. And I was very proud to have been part of the efforts in my past life where we actually did lead by example and transformed markets. So I think my first recommendation is to take all those lessons learned that were compiled across the services, the federal civilian agencies, and apply those to these new, very, very ambitious goals. When you think about federal requirements, right, you have validated requirements, you need an execution mechanism, and you need funding. So that's the trifecta, right? And of course, support. So the challenge in the federal space, as I see it, is that the government already has existing requirements planned, programmed, and potentially funded that now need to revise and incorporate these new ambitious goals. The good news, though, is that industry is at the ready. The great news is that there's existing tools that maybe have been largely underutilized. And it's a great opportunity to find like partnerships to execute. So at Southern and in this new role, what I've been trying to do is take some of those great lessons learned through the past few administrations and the differing priorities, right? And just streamline and baseline at the end of the day, how do we as a utility company do what we do best, provide affordable, reliable, and resilient power at the ready with incorporation of innovative technologies and unique customer requirements. And how do we take that model and now fully embrace what the government needs to achieve? So it's really a convergence of two business models and approaches that need very open and transparent conversation. So my recommendation to all of the folks, within and across Southern, and of course, all of our peer utilities is, engage early, engage now, start having open conversations. The utility services contracts, the statute, GSA area-wide contracts are tools that allow for open, transparent dialogue. They're not meant to be one-off vendor relationships, right? Because your relationship with your utility company is not one-off. It is long-term, it is enduring. You need to continuously talk. And so these two mechanisms give the federal civilian agencies and DoD unique opportunities to work hand in hand in development of these requirements. So at Southern, what we've done is very quickly mobilized our regulated and unregulated teams to provide, with complete support, of course, from our executive leadership, to provide an easy button. And this easy button capitalizes on utility service construct and the GSA area-wide contract that both FEMP and GSA have been on a great campaign to educate federal stakeholders and industry on how to utilize the GSA area-wide Exhibit A. And what this has allowed utility partners to do, and specifically at Southern, we just launched this easy button that allows for complete turnkey solutions from utility infrastructure to the chargers to potentially vehicles, if that's the requirement. And we could do them, we can execute with you either in isolation or turnkey. My ultimate recommendation is a taxpayer first, and pulling from where I was with the Navy, trying to save money day in and day out while meeting mission requirements, is to streamline and take baby steps to learn lessons with early wins that you can build on, and leverage the innovation and applaud the innovation as it becomes easy to do or more understood as it relates to the long-term impact. So bottom line, industry is ready to support, your utility partners are ready to support, and there's tools to do that. Those tools also come with a host of financing options. So even if you don't have upfront capital today through ERSUP dollars or O&M dollars, the GSA area-wide utility service contracts give you 10 years of term to finance with your utility partner in a very transparent way. So thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Monica. I mean, I think, the common theme that we're seeing throughout, and is certainly, I think, well received from my perspective, formerly working in the federal government, is like, the fewer transactions and the more comprehensive you can make something, the greater a chance you have of success. It's when we make things really complicated with a lot of different moving parts that things tend to fall apart. And I think that's a really good transition over to John Vernacchia from Eaton. John is the Energy Transition Segment Director at Eaton, particularly focused on electrical North America sales. John, so thank God we finally have somebody with like a real technical and engineering background who could help. Monica, I know you have a real engineering background, but John, you've heard a ton about, the procurement challenges and about the contracting challenges and about the financing challenges that everybody's facing. But I think Lauren really hit on this earlier, which is, we got to make sure that this stuff all works together. And we got to figure out how to make something that is one comprehensive, understandable, resilient, and secure system. And I know you're working on a lot of the solutions at Eaton. So maybe you can just share with us a little bit about the state of technology and how that sort of, specifically for EVSC, and then how that sort of fits into a larger family of technologies.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Michael. Great question. And a lot of the panels have brought some of these subjects up here, in the conversation today. And that's part of what we're working on at Eaton. We've been working with DoD sites across the country on integrating renewables and microgrid environments for years. And so the electric vehicle infrastructure is kind of a natural extension of that. And how do you prepare your electrical infrastructure at a site, at a base, to make sure you could handle the planned deployment of electric vehicles that are being planned for the future? And then how do you also integrate renewables into that to meet sustainability goals and optimize that whole system for sustainability, resiliency, and cost effectiveness, all of which are really key points. And so some of the technology behind that is, of course, you have the actual, AC and DC chargers themselves that connect to the vehicles, but there's a number of things behind that. And so there's charge management software that then can control the rate that those vehicles charge at, and how do you balance and optimize that. There's local battery energy storage that could be added to help offset or shave a peak demand, for example, when you have all the EV charging stations being used at one time. There's the integration of solar PV in the form of canopies, or if you have the space at a site or military base to put in a ground mount or rooftop solar PV system and use that solar generated power to also charge the vehicles as well. And how do you have that all work together in a microgrid type environment to optimize that use of renewables, make the charging experience optimized for the vehicle operator so they're ready to go when the vehicles are needed? And how do you do that in a cost-effective way through both software and local battery storage and local renewables, so that all works together to deliver a comprehensive solution for the site, depending on what the goals are and the vehicle use patterns, what the dwell time is of the vehicles, et cetera. So, a lot of different factors to consider there to really optimize that solution. And, that's one of the things that Eaton can bring to the party is understanding that entire, electrical power distribution system and provide a turnkey solution for that, as well as looking at the incoming service to the building or the military base, depending on the number of chargers that are deployed and the charging patterns, et cetera. Do you need to upgrade your incoming switchgear or transformers to accommodate those kind of peak loads if you can't balance it off with local solar or battery storage? So it's a pretty complex, engineering system, but it's certainly doable. The technology is available. And then there's a number of new things that are being worked on as well, like software to take advantage of, vehicle to grid charging eventually, and sharing that power that's stored in the vehicles, and, perhaps earn money on that when the vehicle isn't needed to be used, and make that power available back to the grid through utility programs that utilities may offer in the area. So a lot of cool technology being worked on. We've got some things going on at the Eaton Research Labs. We're co-located at the National Renewable Energy Labs out in Golden, Colorado, and some of our folks there are working on some pretty cool demonstration projects in that V2G area. So those are just some of the things we're working on at Eaton.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, John. That's really helpful, I think, just to hear about that breadth and that spectrum of different technologies that need to be considered when you're talking about making these pretty dramatic changes, both to not just to the vehicles themselves, right? Like that is a daunting challenge in and of itself, but you're talking about huge new infrastructure requirements, and those are both challenges and opportunities. So I want to wrap up just with a very sort of a lightning round question, but when we look at this in 10 years from now, and we think about this, where we are today, about making this really ambitious commitment, particularly to federal fleet electrification, but also to just completely changing over the entire transportation sector of the United States into an electrified way. I would just love a reflection of where we succeeded or where we even exceeded our expectations today, and then where are some places that we've fallen short. What's your predictions? And anybody can jump in first and give it a shot.
I'll take a first stab. So I think the imperative when we're looking to decarbonize both the transportation sector and electric sector, EVs are obviously a crucial linchpin. So I think we'll see if we're able to use the natural synergies of EVs to balance renewables, to limit the cost impact of this transition. I think that will be critical if we're going to do this in a way that's equitable and affordable. So I think we'll know if we see ballooning costs and inefficient planning and deployment of resources versus if we can keep things within a reasonable bound. But I think that's absolutely critical.
Awesome.
I'll be happy to go next. I think we'll be surprised by how fast this will happen and how many utilities are actually really ready to go to the table. I'm going to echo what Monica said and said, start the conversation with your utility partner now. I promise you there's a conversation to be had. I also think that one of the challenges we may have or shortfalls is the contracting that comes along with that in DoD. I think that using some of the existing relationships that you have and building off of that, I think is really going to be a streamlined approach, which I think, again, I'm going to echo what Monica said here because I like the points. I think that could hold us back a bit, but I do believe that we kind of have the tools in the toolbox now, and we just need to let the different organizations use what they're good at and help them innovate.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I would just add, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration with utility partners. A lot of the conversations we're having with utilities, they're very interested in understanding how much power is going to the vehicle, how much is there, how much could be used, how much is maybe being generated locally by solar, and making that data and information available to utilities to make informed decisions, and then also for the site owner of that to optimize their system. So I think the whole kind of intelligence behind it that is available with today's technology can really help us optimize this whole EV charging infrastructure and deployment. to make it work better for all of us in the future.
I guess I'll wrap up and say, I think I'm very optimistic, right? I think DoD does a great job and FedCivs at stakeholder engagement. So I think as we think about these really tremendous challenges and opportunities, if the federal government puts the priority on stakeholder engagement to understand truly interested, invested parties like your utility is going to be involved regardless. So leverage the best of the most impacted stakeholders. If that's the approach taken, then everyone will win, because this is planning that requires robust expertise, long-term, a very, very long-term look. And I would just encourage that as you think through your requirements, long-term stakeholder engagement and vested interest float up to the top of the list, and not just execution and getting stuff in the ground.
Yeah, I think that something that you mentioned, Monica, even earlier, I think is exactly what really resonates with me as somebody who's running this consortium, and it's that it is that conversation and collaboration we heard of from all of you and from our other panelists, that's going to be the key to success. And your point about the long-term nature of this infrastructure, the long-term nature of this endeavor, we can turn over the fleet really quickly and just by throwing money at a problem, but that doesn't change the kind of fundamental, that is not the kind of fundamental transformative change that we're talking about. It needs to be a change in mindset for the way we approach some of the challenges and problems that we face on every level, from a climate level, an installation resilience level, and an electric vehicle infrastructure level. So let me just thank you and all the panelists we had today for a really wonderful set of conversations around what I think is going to be an increasingly critical and important issue that we have moving forward. And you've got just a small piece of, I think, the many challenges and opportunities that are going to be associated with this issue moving forward.